Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. And we all know the toxic culture of secrecy within the SNP. We all know they don't like having anything out in the open. They make grandiose claims about openness and transparency, but never at any point do they ever mean it. The last thing they want is openness and transparency, because that may lead to people seeing the truth. As we know, the truth is so very, very appallingly dangerous for them. But this seems to have spread. It's now Circularity Scotland, it seems, also wanted all communications done face to face, rather than having the inconvenience of an email trail showing who said what to whom and when, because after all, it may eventually be used in evidence against them. They even tried to bring this in with banks, insisting that banks did communications face to face and things were said rather than written down, because they don't want the truth to be examined. It goes to show the appalling toxic nature of everything the SNP touches, where everything has to be verbal so that they can never be used in prosecutions. We'll take a look at this article to see why, and why they were so secret, of course, and who was saying what to whom, instead of writing it down where it can be examined later. Here goes. So, SNP accused of creating a secrecy culture with efforts to dodge scrutiny over policy handling, which is why if you do it verbally, there's no record and people can say, oh, we never talked about that, we never had a conversation about that. You can't provide proof. There's no, show me the emails, show me the receipts. There aren't any. And that's why. The former DRS firm admitted it had sought to avoid scrutiny of emails with verbal communication, more evidence of secretive SNP, say the Scottish Tories, and there's Maurice Golden. Written correspondence between SNP ministers and government bodies have been avoided in favour of unverifiable verbal updates in order to avoid scrutiny. The claim follows revelations that the bosses of Circularity Scotland, the firm set up to run the SNP failed deposit return scheme, took steps to prevent information becoming public through freedom of information requests. They knew that the right to freedom of information was there, but if the information wasn't there, it couldn't be revealed. And so they did everything they can to ensure that nothing was written down. And that way they could be as shady as they like, effectively, get away with stuff. And there would be no way of proving it. And we will go and have a look at something in a minute. We can see why Circularity Scotland was set up in the way it was and done as a private company, and there's a reason for it. We'll have a look. The disaster policy has been targeted by the Scottish Conservatives, who say that the recent revaluation sums up the culture of secrecy at the heart of this SNPGreen government. A government that does not want people to know what it's getting up to, because they know people would basically dangle them from lampposts if they found out the true, unadulterated truth. According to the report, Circularity Scotland was especially concerned about political opposition parties making their dealings public in an attempt to build their knowledge of the company and recycling scheme. Hang on a minute, you don't work for the SNP, you work for the Scottish Government, whomever that government is made up of. Unless you're saying that you're working in a way to protect and only further the advances of the SNP, in which case that's party political, which means you shouldn't be receiving a penny out of public funds, which means you are all publicly liable for that debt, which means the individuals are liable for the debt, because they are working not as a government agency, but as a political party agency. So let's start treating them like that, and then let's go after these people and get every penny back. Circularity Scotland admitted it has sought to avoid scrutiny of emails from the Scottish National Investment Bank. In the exchange, published via ironically through a Freedom of Information exchange, dated the 1st of August last year, the DRS firm expressed concern about whether its dealings with the bank may be revealed. It's a public body. The bank is an extension of the government, and so it should be rightly examinable. Maurice Golden, a Scottish Conservative MSP, is quoted in the Times as saying, "It is not only astonishing that Circularity Scotland were deliberately avoiding trying to put anything about their engagement with ministers and officials in writing, but asked if a similar practice could be adopted with the Scottish National Investment Bank, so that the bank wasn't putting anything in writing. Why was nothing going in writing? What is so dodgy? What is so potentially illegal that they didn't want any of this coming out? Is this merely a scam so that certain people can make a lot of money off the public very quickly? Because it's starting to look increasingly like that's exactly what this is. This is starting to look like something that the police need to be investigating. This is starting to look like massive, whole-scale embezzlement from the taxpayers of Scotland to feather the nests of a few select individuals at the top of this particularly nasty pile of shit that they're calling the Scottish Government. Their failure to minute meetings and publish material in the public interest has been corrosive, and this is just the latest case, he said, where it has led to an enormous loss of public funds and a huge loss in jobs and to businesses. The DRS cost the taxpayer 86 million and growing, and not all the claims are in yet. It's going to be a lot more than 86 million by the time it's finished. And several damning decisions from the Greens Minister Lorna Slater have come to light since she decided to delay it until 2025. A decision she claimed at the time was down to the UK government's intervention, but which it turns out, in actual fact, were entirely down to her stupidity, her laziness, and her inability to do her goddamn job. She failed to put the requests in time. She failed to meet with the appropriate experts in the field. She pushed ahead with the claim that glass should be involved when everybody, and I mean every single person, other than Lorna Slater and the Greens, said glass should not be included. And then, because they'd lost one court case, tried to blame Westminster so that it would be deflecting from the fact that she had got it wrong personally herself. And it would never have been feasible to go ahead in its current form because she just is too stupid to deal with a project of this scale. Mr. Golden added, if the process of setting up the deposit return scheme had been more open and responsive, this reckless waste of taxpayers' money may have been avoided. In the aftermath of its failure, the Scottish public deserves the truth about what went wrong. And we are starting to see the truth. And the truth is, 2 words, Lorna Slater. And for those responsible to be held to account, well, Lorna Slater needs to be held to account, but I think it's very unlikely she will. But she is personally the failure underpinning the whole series of failures above it. But this scale of this corruption, of this secrecy, of this constant desire to keep things hidden and shrouded and veiled, just in case the truth ever comes out. We don't want anyone to know, so we'll do verbal communications, and that way we absolute plausible deniability. Martin Whitfield, Scottish Labour's business manager, said, this shameful attempt to dodge transparency is astounding from an organisation charged with delivering government policy. The fact the SNP seemingly agreed to this dodgy setup speaks volumes about the rotten culture of secrecy at the heart of their government. Circularity Scotland said in the Freedom of Information release, we have seen a number of attempts from political opposition parties, who will later be government, to try and build their knowledge of CSL, Circularity Scotland Limited, and DRS using the right of freedom of information. Are you saying that you disagree with people knowing what's going on with their money? Taxpayers' money, and you don't want taxpayers to know what you're doing with it? If that's the case, firstly, what the hell are you doing with taxpayers' money that needs to be kept secret? Secondly, do you understand that the SNP are only the government now and that they can change later, and then you're going to have what are now the opposition parties in government? Are you telling me now you're poisoning the well for them, the next government? That makes you complicit in this. That means that you are operating not as a government agency, but as an SNP agency. So if you want to start making the withdrawals from your bank so that you can pay back the money you've had, that'd be nice. It's ridiculous, isn't it? Anyway, for this reason, our discussions with the Scottish Government are currently predominantly verbal. to updates to minimise the risk that written updates are requested under freedom of information and disclosure of confidential information entering the public domain. They are blatantly setting it out that they want verbal communications so that nothing is written down, so that nothing can come back to them and bite them. That is the actions of criminals. That is what criminals do. If everything they were doing was open, above board, and above all honest, they wouldn't be requesting this. So therefore, something stinks. Something in this is illegal, and we need to follow the money. This whole thing needs a forensic accountant examination. They said, we wanted to understand if there is a similar freedom of information risk in the data we share with the Scottish National Investment Bank. It would be helpful to get a better understanding from the SNIB as to the potential risks here. What are your obligations if such requests are made to you? In other words, please God, don't tell anyone what we're doing. All verbal, let's keep it hidden, and that way we can continue our criminal activity free for any potential leaking or request from the public for information that would unveil the awful things we're doing. That's how it's reading. The bank replied that as a public sector organisation, it was legally obliged to follow FOI laws, but could, and this is the way it goes, but could maintain confidentiality in some cases if that outweighed the public interest in disclosing details. The Scottish Government said, and here we go, and this is why it was set up as the way it was, Circularity Scotland Limited is a private, non-profit company and is therefore not subject to the Freedom of Information Act. They've created a public limited company, basically a private company, a limited company. And because it's a limited company, it's not a government organisation and therefore not covered by the Act. However, the two shareholders of this company are both government ministers, not the individuals, the minister. So when the minister changes, the new minister becomes the shareholder. Every shareholder is therefore a government minister, therefore the company is owned by the government and it should therefore be subject to freedom of information. But because they've set up the rules, the SNP set up the rules, they don't have to follow the rules. They don't have to release things under freedom of information. We need to get those rules changed. Otherwise, this is what's going to happen. Virtually everything will then become a series of limited companies, private limited companies, and therefore no information will be under the Freedom of Information Act. Not having this Freedom of Information Act, inveigling and keeping things from people, is the surest sign that this whole enterprise, this whole Scottish Government under the SNP, is nothing more than a cover for organised crime. The bank declined to comment because of course it will. That's annoying, isn't it? My phone alarm going off. Anyway, I shall round off there. That's just right at the end anyway. I shall round off there and I shall come up. Yep, typical SNP policy. Secrets and lies. Keep everything covered. Never tell the truth. And make sure that everyone you're dealing with also never tells the truth. And if you can avoid putting things in writing, then people will never know because everything will be deniable. And even if there's a freedom of information request, the civil service will say, oh, there is no information. Yeah, despicable behaviour really, isn't it? And they keep getting caught out time and time again. And then they keep, trotting out that mantra of openness, honesty and transparency. My arse. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. If you like what you see in here on the channel, please hit the subscribe button, ring the bell, leave a like, leave a comment, please share the video. And until next time, stay safe, stay well, and remember, we'll vote them out soon, and they'll soon be history. Bye.